Self-hating Jew or self-loathing Jew is a pejorative term used for a Jewish person that holds anti-Semitic views. The concept gained widespread currency after Theodor Lessing's 1930 book Der Jüdische Selbsthass, which tries to explain the prevalence of Jewish intellectuals inciting antisemitism with their extremely hateful view towards Judaism. Jewish self-hate has been described as a neurotic reaction to the impact of antisemitism by Jews accepting, expressing, and even exaggerating the basic assumptions of the anti-Semite. The term became something of a key term of opprobrium in and beyond Cold War-era debates about Zionism. Similar accusations of being uncomfortable with one's Jewishness were already being made by groups of Jews against each other before Zionism existed as a movement. According to academic author W.M.L. Finley, the expression self-hating Jew is often used rhetorically to discount Jews who differ in their lifestyles, interests or political positions from their accusers. Finley, a member of the psychology department at University of Surrey, distinguishes between Jewish anti-Semitism and Jewish self-hatred, arguing that while the literature is full of examples of Jews who espoused anti-Semitism with statements dangerous and damning to all Jews, whether this amounts to self-hatred is not easy to assess. Usage of self-hatred can also designate dislike or hatred of a group to which one belongs. The term has a long history and debates over the role of Israel in Jewish identity, where it is used against Jewish critics of Israeli government policy. Alvin H. Rosenfeld, an academic author who does not use the term self-hatred, dismisses such arguments as disingenuous, referring to them as the ubiquitous rubric criticism of Israel, stating that vigorous discussion of Israeli policy and actions is not in question. Alan Dershowitz limits the term self-hatred to extreme Jewish anti-Zionists who despise anything Jewish, ranging from their religion to the Jewish state, saying it does not apply to all Israel bashers. The academic historian Gerald Auerbach uses the term Jewish self-loathing to characterize Jews who perversely seek to bolster their Jewish credentials by defaming Israel. The cultural historian Sander Gilman has written, one of the most recent forms of Jewish self-hatred is the virulent opposition to the existence of the State of Israel. He uses the term not against those who oppose Israel's policy, but against Jews who are opposed to Israel's existence. The concept of Jewish self-hatred has been described by Anthony Lerman as an entirely bogus concept, one that serves no other purpose than to marginalize and demonize political opponents, who says that is used increasingly as a personal attack in discussions about the new antisemitism. Ben Cohen criticizes Lerman, saying no actual evidence is introduced to support any of this. Lerman recognizes the controversy whether extreme vilification of Israel amounts to antisemitism and says that antisemitism can be disguised as anti-Zionism, which is the concern of Rosenfeld and Gilman addressed above. The sociologist Irving Louis Horowitz reserves the term for Jews who pose a danger to the Jewish community, using Jewish self-hater to describe the court Jew, who validates the slander as he attempts to curry the favor of masters and rulers. The historian Bernard Wasserstein prefers the term Jewish anti-Semitism, which he says was often termed Jewish self-hatred. He asks, could a Jew be an anti-Semite? And responds, many Jews have internalized elements of anti-Semitic discourse, succumb to what Theodor Hamro has called psychological surrender. Wasserstein goes on to say that self-hating Jews, afflicted by some form of anti-Semitism, were not so much haters of themselves as haters of other Jews. History and German equals. The origins of terms such as Jewish self-hatred lie in the mid-19th century feuding between German Orthodox Jews of the Breslau Seminary and Reform Jews. Each side accused the other of betraying Jewish identity, the Orthodox Jews accusing the Reform Jews of identifying more closely with German Protestantism and German nationalism than with Judaism. According to Amos Elan, during 19th-century German Jewish assimilation, conflicting pressures on sensitive and privileged or gifted young Jews produced a reaction later known as Jewish self-hatred. Its roots were not simply professional or political but emotional. Elan uses the term Jewish self-hatred synonymously with Jewish antisemitism when he points out, one of the most prominent Austrian antisemites was Otto Weininger, a brilliant young Jew, who published Sex and Character, Attacking Jews and Women. Elan attributes Jewish antisemitism as a cause in the overall growth of antisemitism when he says, Weininger's book inspired the typical Viennese adage that anti-Semitism did not really get serious until it was taken up by Jews. According to John P. Jackson, Jr., the concept developed in the late 19th century in German Jewish discourse as a response of German Jews to popular antisemitism that primarily was directed at Eastern European Jews. For German Jews, the Eastern European Jew became the bad Jew. According to Sander Gilman, the concept of the self-hating Jew developed from a merger of the image of the mad Jew and the self-critical Jew, and was developed to counter suggestions that an alleged Jewish stereotype of mental illness was due to inbreeding. Within the logic of the concept, those who accuse others of being self-hating Jews may themselves be self-hating Jews. Gilman says the ubiquitousness of self-hatred cannot be denied. And it has shaped the self-awareness of those treated as different perhaps more than they themselves have been aware. The specific term self-hating Jew, and Jewish self-hatred only came into use later, developing from Theodor Herzl's polemical use of the term anti-Semite of Jewish origin, in the context of his project of political Zionism. The underlying concept gained common currency in this context, since Zionism was an important part of the vigorous debates that were occurring amongst Jews at the time about anti-Semitism, assimilation and Jewish identity. Herzl appears to have introduced the phrase anti-Semite of Jewish origin in his 1896 book, Der Judenstaat, which launched political Zionism. He was referring to philanthropic Zionists, assimilated Jews who might wish to remain in their home countries while at the same time encouraging the Jewish proletariat to emigrate. Yet did not support Herzl's political project for a Jewish state. Ironically, Herzl was soon complaining that his polemical turn was often being applied to him, for example by Karl Kraus. Assimilationists and anti-Zionists accused Zionists of being self-haters, for promoting the idea of the strong Jew using rhetoric close to that of the anti-Semites. Zionists accused their opponents of being self-haters, for promoting the image of the Jew that would perpetuate his inferior position in the modern world. The Austrian Jewish journalist, Anton Kuh, argued in a 1921 book Juden und Deutsche that the concept of Jewish anti-Semitism was unhelpful, and should be replaced with the term Jewish self-hatred, but it was not until the 1930 publication of the German Jewish anti-Nazi philosopher Theodor Lessing's book Der Jüdische Selbsthass that the term gained widespread currency. Lessing's book supposedly charts Lessing a unregistered trademark's journey from Jewish self-hater to Zionist. In it he analyzes the writings of Jews such as Otto Weininger and Arthur Speech who expressed hatred for their own Judaism. Lessing was assassinated by Nazi agents shortly after Hitler came to power. In English the first major discussion of the topic was in the 1940s by Kurt Lewin, who was Lessing's colleague at the University of Berlin in 1930. Lewin emigrated from Germany to the United States in 1933, and though focused on Jews also argued for a similar phenomenon among Polish, Italian and Greek immigrants to the USA. Lewin's was a theoretical account, declaring that the issue is well known among Jews themselves, and supporting his argument with anecdotes. Following Lewin's lead, the concept gained widespread currency. The 1940s and 1950s were the age of self-hatred, a unregistered trademark. In effect, a bitter war broke out over questions of Jewish identity. It was a kind of a Jewish Cold War, a unregistered trademark, in which questions of Jewish identity were contentiously debated. The use of the concept in debates over Jewish identity, for example over resistance to the integration of African Americans into Jewish neighborhoods, died down by the end of the 1970s, having been steadily emptied of most of its earlier psychological, social, and theoretical content and became largely a slogan. The term was used in a derogatory way during the 1940s by militant Zionists, but the 1963 publication of Hannah Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem opened a new chapter. Her criticism of the trial as a show trial provoked heated public debate, including accusations of self-hatred, and overshadowed her earlier work criticizing German Jewish parvenu assimilationism. In the following years, after the 1967 Six-Day War and 1973 Yom Kippur War, Willingness to give moral and financial support to Israel constituted what one historian called the existential definition of American Jewishness, a unregistered trademark. This meant that the opposite was also true. Criticism of Israel came to constitute the existential definition of a Jewish self-hatred, a unregistered trademark. This is dismissed by Rosenfeld, saying it masquerades as victimization, and can hardly be expected to be taken seriously since criticism of Israel proceeds across all the media in this country and within Israel itself. Even Commentary, the Jewish journal which had once been considered the venue of self-hating Jews with questionable commitments to the Zionist project, came under the editorship of Norman Podhoretz to staunchly support Israel. In his 2006 essay Progressive Jewish Thought and the New Antisemitism, Alvin H. Rosenfeld takes a hard look at Jewish authors, whose statements go well beyond legitimate criticism of Israel, and considers rhetoric that calls into question Israel's right to continued existence to be anti-Semitic. The use of the concept of self-hatred in Jewish debates about Israel has grown more frequent and more intense in the US and the UK, with the issue particularly widely debated in 2007, leading to the creation of the British Independent Jewish Voices. The Forward reported that the group was formed by about 130 generally leftist Jews. It was the Rosenfeld essay, which did not use the term Jewish self-hatred, that led to the 2007 debate. Critics claimed the charge of anti-Semitism implied Jewish self-hatred to those criticizing Israel. Rosenfeld responded that such claims were disingenuous, and for some a dialectical scam validating themselves as intellectual martyrs. The New York Times reported that the essay spotlighted the issue of when legitimate criticism of Israel ends and anti-Semitic statements begin. Social and psychological explanations. The issue has periodically been covered in the academic social psychology literature on social identity. Such studies frequently cite Lewin as evidence that people may attempt to distance themselves from membership in devalued groups because they accept, to some degree, the negative evaluations of their group held by the majority, and because these social identities are an obstacle to the pursuit of social status. Modern social psychology literature uses terms such as self-stigmatization, internalized oppression, and false consciousness to describe this type of phenomenon. Kenneth Levin, a Harvard psychiatrist, says that Jewish self-hatred has two causes: Stockholm Syndrome, where population segments under chronic siege commonly embrace the indictments of their besiegers however bigoted and outrageous, as well as the psychodynamics of abused children, who almost invariably blame themselves for their predicament, ascribe it to their being bad, and nurture fantasies that by becoming good they can mollify their abusers and end their torment. According to Howard W. Polsky, the social scientist, feelings about Jewish marginality are often a step away from self-hatred. He then says, Jewish self-hatred denotes that a person has adopted Gentiles' definition of Jew as bad in one way or another, and that being Jewish will hinder their success or identity. Usage. It is argued by some academics that the concept of Jewish self-hatred is based on an essentialization of Jewish identity. Accounts of Jewish self-hatred often suggest that criticizing other Jews, and integrating with Gentile society, reveals hatred of only a unregistered trademark's own Jewish origins. Yet both in the early 20th century, where the concept developed, and today, there are groups of Jews who had important differences in identity based on class, culture, religious outlook, and education, and hostility between these groups can only be considered self-hate if one assumes that a superordinate Jewish identity should take precedence over other groupings of Jews. Yet such hostility between groups has at times drawn on some of the rhetoric of anti-Semitism. Criticism of subgroups of Jews which drew on anti-Semitic rhetoric were common in 19th and 20th century arguments over Jewish identity. In practice, according to one academic, whilst there have been Jewish writers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries who consistently employed virulent anti-Semitic rhetoric without seeming to value any aspects of being a Jew, too often those who accuse others of being self-haters search for examples of when they have criticized Jews or Judaism but ignore examples of when those they criticize have shown they value being a Jew. He argues that Jewish anti-Semitism does not necessarily amount to self-hatred, implying that anti-Semitic Jew may be a more accurate term to use. Other authors have also shown a preference for using antisemitism rather than self-hatred. The term is in use in Jewish publications such as the Jewish Week and the Jerusalem Post in a number of contexts, often synonymously with anti-Semitic Jew. It is used to criticize a performer or artist who portrays Jews negatively. As a shorthand description of supposed psychological cognitive-dysfunctional characters. In articles about the erosion of tradition. And to discount Jews who criticize Israeli policies or particular Jewish practices. However, the widest usage of the term is currently in relation to debates over Israel. In these debates, the accusation is used by right-wing Zionists to assert that Zionism and/or support for Israel is a core element of Jewish identity. Jewish criticism of Israeli policy is therefore considered a turning away from Jewish identity itself. Thus, some of those who have been accused of being a self-hating Jew have characterized the term as a replacement for a charge of anti-Semitism that will not stick, or as pathologizing them. Some who use the term have equated it with anti-Semitism, on the part of those thus addressed, or with so-called Euro-enlightened Euro-unregistered trademark Jews who refuse to associate themselves with people who practice a Euro-backward Euro-unregistered trademark religion. One novelist, Philip Roth, who are Euro, because of the nature of the Jewish characters in his novels, such as the 1969 Portnoy's Complaint, a Euro has often been accused of being a self-hating Jew, argues that all novels deal with human dilemmas and weaknesses, and that to self-censor by only writing about positive Jewish characters would represent a submission to anti-Semitism. Similar terms, self-loathing Jew is used synonymously with self-hating Jew. Anti-Semitic Jew can be used synonymously as well. Self-hating Jew has also been compared to the term Uncle Tom as used in the African American community. The term auto-antisemitism is also used in Hebrew synonymously. In a column in Haaretz, Uzi Zilber used the term Jew flu as a synonym for Jewish self-hatred. See also. References. Further reading, Henry Bean, The Believer, Confronting Jewish Self-Hatred, Thunder's Mouth Press, 2002. ISBN 1-56025-372-X. David Baal, The Stars and Stripes of David, The Nation, May 4, 1998. John Murray Kupdi, Ordeal of Civility, Freud, Marx, Levi Strauss, and the Jewish Struggle with Modernity, Beacon Press, 1987. ISBN 0-8070-3609-9. Sander L. Gilman, Jewish Self-Hatred, Anti-Semitism and the Hidden Language of the Jews, Johns Hopkins University Press, 1990. ISBN 0-8018-4063-5. Theodor Lessing, A Euro-OE Jewish Self-Hatred, a Euro, Nativ, 17, 1930/2004, pages 49 a Euro 54. Kurt Lewin, Self-Hatred Among Jews, Contemporary Jewish Record, June 1941. Reprinted in Kurt Lewin, Resolving Social Conflicts, Selected Papers on Group Dynamics, Harper and Row, 1948. David Mamet, The Wicked Son, Anti-Semitism, Self-Hatred, and the Jews, Skokken Books, 2006. ISBN 0-8052-4207-4. Raphael Patai, The Jewish Mind, Wayne State University Press, 1996. ISBN 0-8143-2651-X. Chapter 17, Jewish Self-Hate. External links, Ask the Rabbis, What is a Self-Hating Jew? Moment, November-December 2009. Rabbi Levi Brackman, Confronting the Self-Hating Jew, in News, September 1, 2006. Rabbi Michael Lerner, Israel's Jewish Critics Aren't Self-Hating, Los Angeles Times, April 28, 2002. Reprinted at Common Dreams News Center. Daniel Levitas, Hate and Hypocrisy, What is Behind the Rare but Recurring Phenomenon of Jewish Anti-Semites? Southern Poverty Law Center Intelligence Report, Winter 2002. Jacqueline Rose, The Myth of Self-Hatred, The Guardian, February 8, 2007. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Love, Hate, and Jewish Identity, First Things, November 1997. Menachem Wecker, In Defense of a Self-Hating Unregistered Trademark Jews, Conversations with the Targets of Mazada 2000 Unregistered Trademark SSHIT List, Jewish Currents, May 2007. French, Martine Gilson, Le Petit Soldat de la Pouve Noire, Nouvelle Observateur, October 9, 2003, French, Les Autres Registered Trademarked as Uif Alexander Adler, November 1, 2003.